The world's most powerful leaders touched down in Canada, their arrival marked by the familiar spectacle of flashing cameras and diplomatic protocol. As the planes taxied to a halt on the tarmac in Alberta, anticipation filled the air. Motorcades snaked through the streets, carrying presidents, prime ministers, and their entourages to the summit venue nestled in the mountains. The world expected the usual display of unity: diplomatic handshakes, polite smiles, and the iconic group photo at the summit entrance. These moments, carefully choreographed for the cameras, were meant to signal stability and cooperation among the globe's most influential nations. But this year, the script was torn up. Instead of a warm welcome, the leaders landed in the midst of a storm, one fueled by Canadian outrage and a sense of betrayal. The G7 summit in Kananaskis, Alberta, June 2025, was immediately overshadowed by scenes of protest and confrontation. Police formed lines between demonstrators in the summit building, while news cameras captured the chaos unfolding outside. This was not the polite, reserved Canada the world thought it knew. Instead, it was a nation raising its voice, demanding to be heard on the global stage. The chants and banners made it clear: Canadians were not content to stand quietly by. The anger was focused too. The main targets, US President Donald Trump and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, were singled out by name, their policies and presence seen as deeply offensive to many Canadians. For many, the attendance of Trump and Modi was more than a diplomatic disagreement. It was a direct challenge to Canadian values of inclusion, justice, and respect for human rights. Protesters held up placards and art that spoke volumes about their disapproval. From the airport runways to the steps of Parliament, the message echoed: Canada was watching, and it was not pleased. The protests followed the leaders at every turn, a constant reminder that the world was changing, and so was Canada. The demonstrations brought together a remarkable cross-section of Canadian society. Indigenous elders drummed in solidarity, Sikh activists waved their flags, and politicians from across the spectrum addressed the crowds, each group voicing its own unique concerns. Environmentalists, labor unions, students, and faith leaders all joined in, each with their own grievances, ranging from climate inaction to economic inequality and the erosion of democratic rights. Inside the summit, the original agenda, global economics and security, was quickly pushed aside. Urgent debates erupted over sovereignty, justice, and human rights as the voices from outside seeped into the conference halls. For Prime Minister Mark Carney, still new to the world of politics, the summit became a trial by fire. He found himself caught between the demands of international diplomacy and the passionate will of his own people, visible just beyond the summit's walls. The G7 leaders had come to Canada to talk about the world's future. But before any deals could be struck, they had to listen to the anger, the hope, and the determination of a nation unwilling to be ignored. The confrontation began the moment President Trump's plane touched down in Calgary, the city buzzing with anticipation and tension. The world's eyes were fixed on this international summit, but few expected the most powerful statement would come not from a world leader, but from the heart of the land itself. Waiting on the tarmac was Stephen Crowchild, Tsuut'ina First Nation leader, standing tall in traditional regalia. His presence was more than ceremonial. It was a living testament to centuries of indigenous resilience, culture, and unbroken connection to the land. As he greeted the arriving officials, he carried with him the weight of his ancestors and the hopes of his people. Crowchild, his voice steady but his eyes burning with the pain of generations, spoke out. He channeled the anger and sorrow caused by policies and leaders like Trump, but his words were not of vengeance. Instead, he offered a message rooted in peace, responsibility, and the sacred duty to protect the earth for future generations. His speech was both a lament and a call to action. In a powerful gesture, Crowchild presented treaty medals, artifacts older than the nation of Canada itself. These medals, passed down through generations, served as a stark reminder to the world: Indigenous rights are not relics of the past, but living promises that demand respect and recognition today. This act of presenting the medals was a quiet but potent form of defiance. It was a demand for justice, a call for the honoring of treaties, and a declaration of sovereignty. The world watched as Crowchild stood firm, his dignity unshaken, his message unmistakable. Crowchild's message was clear and unwavering: instead of war, I choose peace. In a world often torn by conflict and division, his words echoed with a rare moral clarity, offering a path forward built on respect and understanding. He called on all G7 leaders to protect the world's water, reminding them that water is life and that its protection is a sacred responsibility shared by all nations. His plea was not just for his people, but for the future of humanity itself. Crowchild's intervention transformed what could have been a routine diplomatic protocol into a moment of profound moral clarity. Delegates and leaders were moved, some visibly shaken, as the truth of his words cut through the formalities of the summit. The image of an Indigenous leader standing face-to-face with the American president became a defining moment of the summit. It was a powerful symbol of resistance, dignity, and the enduring strength of Indigenous peoples. On Canadian soil, the voices of First Peoples could not be ignored. Their message of peace, justice, and stewardship resonated far beyond the summit, reminding the world that true leadership begins with listening to those who have cared for the land since time immemorial. The anger wasn't limited to Alberta. Across the country, Canadians from all walks of life were voicing their frustration, and nowhere was this more visible than in the nation's capital. Ottawa, usually known for its calm and measured political climate, was suddenly at the center of a storm of outrage and protest. Days before the summit, Ottawa was already boiling. The streets around Parliament Hill filled with demonstrators, their voices echoing through the corridors of power. The air was thick with tension as citizens demanded answers and accountability from their leaders. On June 12, NDP MP Charlie Angus took to the podium, his words cutting through the noise. He called Trump a gangster president and accused him of police-state tyranny. Angus's speech was broadcast nationwide, quickly becoming a rallying cry for those who felt Canada's values were under threat. Angus cited Trump's use of U.S. soldiers against protesters, highlighting the growing concern over the militarization of political dissent. The images of armed troops confronting civilians were deeply unsettling for many Canadians, who saw them as a warning sign of eroding democratic norms. The outrage was further fueled by a flood of messages from Canadians, many of whom were shocked and angered that a convicted felon was being welcomed by their government. Social media lit up with calls for action, and the sense of betrayal was palpable. In Parliament, Angus didn't hold back. He accused Trump of over 100 attacks on Canada, including efforts to remove Canada from the Five Eyes alliance, a cornerstone of the country's security partnerships. The debate in the House of Commons grew heated, with politicians from all parties weighing in on the crisis. Angus warned Prime Minister Carney that Trump was a clear and present danger to Canadian sovereignty. He urged the government to take a firm stand, insisting that the stakes had never been higher for Canada's independence and international standing. The declaration that Canada could no longer view the U.S. as an ally marked a dramatic shift in the country's foreign policy. For decades, the two nations had stood shoulder to shoulder, but now, that partnership was being openly questioned in the halls of power. The outrage in Ottawa signaled that old diplomatic niceties were no longer enough. Canadians were demanding a new approach, one that put their values and sovereignty first, even if it meant standing up to their closest neighbor. For Canada's Sikh community, inviting Prime Minister Modi was a painful betrayal. Their anger stemmed from the 2023 assassination of Hardeep Singh Nijjar, a Sikh leader, and Trudeau's public accusation of Indian government involvement. For Sikh Canadians, Modi's presence validated a government they held responsible for fear and violence. Activist Moninder Singh called Carney's invitation deeply insulting, arguing it should have been conditional on India's cooperation with the murder investigation. Protests erupted, fueled by ongoing security warnings to Sikh activists from the RCMP. The outrage was about both past violence and the present danger to Canadian citizens. To understand the anger at Modi, look back to June 2023. Hardeep Singh Nijjar was murdered in British Columbia. Canada accused India of orchestrating the killing, expelling 6 Indian diplomats. India retaliated, plunging relations into crisis. The RCMP's ongoing investigation and warnings to Sikh activists created a climate of fear. At the heart, Canada's claim that a foreign power killed a Canadian on Canadian soil, a violation of sovereignty. India accused Canada of harboring extremists, while Canada insisted on free speech and peaceful advocacy. Against this backdrop, Carney's G7 invitation to Modi felt like a premature attempt to normalize relations. For many, it ignored the gravity of the accusation and put strategy over principle. Canadian sovereignty, they insisted, was non-negotiable. Amid public fury, Prime Minister Carney walked a diplomatic tightrope. His office defended inviting Trump and Modi as necessary for Canada's interest in a fractured world. The rationale: India's economic importance and the need to avoid alienating another major power during a US trade war. Modi agreed to a law enforcement dialogue, a small concession but not enough for critics. Hosting Trump was framed as a chance to defend Canadian sovereignty face to face. Carney's balancing act risked pleasing no one, seen by many as appeasement. The government tried to contain outrage and focus on the summit's agenda, but public reaction overwhelmed those efforts. Carney's first major test revealed the limits of technocratic diplomacy in the face of moral outrage. The 2025 G7 summit marked a national awakening for Canada. The old assumption of the US as a steadfast ally was crumbling under Trump's aggressive policies. MP Angus's statement that Canada could no longer view the US as an ally captured a growing sentiment. Simultaneously, the crisis with India forced Canada to confront the dangers of transnational repression. The outrage from the Sikh community underscored that diplomacy can't ignore citizens' safety and rights. Canada was shifting from quiet diplomacy to a more assertive, values-driven stance. The protests weren't just about Trump or Modi, they were about the principles Canada stands for. Canadians were drawing a line: sovereignty and human rights are not negotiable. Amid the anger, moments of hope emerged. Stephen Crowchild's choice for peace, despite his rage, became a powerful refrain. His appeal to G7 leaders was a call for responsible stewardship of the planet. Crowchild's leadership elevated the discourse, reminding all that the goal is a just and sustainable world. His diplomacy was rooted in the human spirit, not statecraft. The image of an Indigenous leader choosing peace offered a counter-narrative to conflict. Even in fractured times, dialogue and common ground are possible. The 2025 G7 summit was more than an outburst. It was a unified wake-up call from Canadians to world leaders. The protests and confrontations sent a clear message. Canadian values must be at the forefront of international engagement. This was not a protest against the G7 but against diplomacy conducted in a moral vacuum. The events forced a national conversation about what it means to be an ally and a host. Canadians demanded mutual respect and adherence to the rule of law. The summit will be remembered for the bold stand taken by the people, not for any communique. The message: world leaders must listen to Canadians who fiercely protect their sovereignty and values.